nice little thing, we pursue her. See a nice little thing, we pursue her. Yeah. All right. We are good. All right. So the long anticipated part 2 of a convo. I don't even want to say podcast at this point. Don't want to say interview, but just having a convo with a great friend, somebody who's become a great friend, somebody that I look always to see what their input perspective is. And we have with us clinical trauma expert Alex Rassekh. And I always want to make sure that I'm pronouncing it right. So I practicing it. Tell me if I got it right.
You got it right, man.
There we go.
Is the English pronunciation. Rassekh would be the Persian Arabic pronunciation. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you all remember through a friend, Pete and Shaga of mine, Dr. DeNobles. Alex was nice enough to reach out and say, you know what, I think it's time for a part 2. He must have heard the conversations that I was having in my life. And I think it's time for us to, have that part 2, explore a lot of what's going on right now. There's always a lot for us to talk about, and I always appreciate your perspective. So first and foremost, just want to thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here, man. I love these organic, authentic conversations, man. And there's so much to talk about. There's always so much to talk about. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, they're needed. And it's funny. We talk about talking as if it's just something that we I think we take for granted, let me say, because especially in the current climate right now, if you don't agree with somebody 100% of the time, it's like you can't even have a conversation with them. So for me, if I agree with somebody 100% of the time, that means I don't need to be talking to you because I can't learn anything from you. So I always enjoy, people giving their perspective and me being able to sit back and learn, especially from somebody like you, who I'm not sure if you all do remember, but Alex is a clinical trauma expert in the mental health space, a health clinician who is extremely passionate about just helping people. You have an interesting background. I just want to refresh people. Started off working on the pharmaceutical side and then decided that you wanted to transition into helping people in a different way. Mm-hmm. You and I have had multiple conversations that go a little bit deep. Maybe we can tap into it a little bit, scratch the surface on them, and bring people in with, of course, we don't want people, they'll be looking at me saying like, oh, they already think I'm a conspiracy theorist. So it's it's good when I can bring somebody else on and see like, yo, see, he thinks the same thing. So this is where it's like nowadays, if you question anything, you're just labeled as, oh no, conspiracy theorists. Let's cancel them. And that's the culture that we live in. And we do just take for granted having these conversations and being able to just exchange ideas with people that we trust. We value their opinion and we value their perspective.
Yeah. I mean, that's the environment we're living in now. A question I've been asking myself a lot lately is, when I say lately, I mean for years, not like the last week or two. How do human beings engage in an authentic, constructive dialogue where we can share ideas openly without feeling like we have to walk on eggshells, right? How do we do that? What qualities are necessary within individuals or within society to allow us to, engage in an authentic dialogue? Because that's the kind of dialogue that will create real change, that will bring about healing and resolve a lot of society's problems, I think. But first, people have to be able to just be real with each other and have real conversations without canceling each other, without killing each other, getting at each other's throats because somebody has a different opinion or view of something,
Yeah, and where to me it's become so discouraging is the fact that we will have conversations with people that we know we care about and people that we know care about us. And outside of this particular area, we value their opinion. We've engaged in many conversations with them and have been fine. But it seems like the climate is so divisive, so toxic right now that exactly what you said, you can't even have a convo and just disagree or even question. It's to the point where forget disagreeing. That's already out the window. But a lot of things we can't even ask questions about. It's kind of like you got to either just go with the narrative or be shunned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I wonder where that comes from. I wonder why. I always ask myself the question of why. I don't know if that's useful, but I try to like analyze social forces, things going on in society. It wasn't always this way, At least it seems that way. Like why have we gotten to a point where everything is so black and white and everything is so polarized?
Hmm.
So like you said, if somebody asks or questions something, there's a dogma. There's a lot of dogmatic thinking where a lot of people believe they have the truth.
Mm.
Right? Like my perspective is factually true no matter what, and you better not question it. That's dogmatic.
Mm.
That's a dogmatic mindset. And it seems like these kinds of things are becoming more and more common. To your point,
Mhm.
like we can't question things even.
Yeah, I agree. It's like I always say that we've turned everything into sports where we just root
Mm,
for people, we root for things, we root for this political party, we root for all these different areas rather than just being able to we fanaticize about everything. So we're
mm,
fans of it. It's like trying to convince a Cowboys fan that they're not the greatest team on earth. You're just not going to do it. But the problem, it's okay to do that with sports because it's
right.
sports, but we can't use that we can't apply that in every single area of our life, because if that's the case, we're going to always be defending instead of observing. And when we're not observing, then we're never going to have a full understanding on it, especially if we're not willing to hear perspectives that are not aligned with our current perspective.
What you just said there, David, to me was subtle and profound. You said defending rather than observing. And to me that's the crux of it, because if you're in a defensive mode, your ability to take in new information and listen is going to be impaired.
Mm-hmm.
So, from a mental health perspective, from a psychological neuroscientific perspective, as human beings, we all have an internal model of reality in our heads. Everybody has a model of what the world is about, why they're here, who they are, what they're doing. This is a model of reality that we have in our minds. And that model is constantly being updated as we gain new information and new experiences, right? And so, if we're not able to take in new experiences and new information and integrate that to update our internal model, then we're stagnating. We're not growing. We're not learning anything new. We're stuck in life. That model should be refreshed and updated as we acquire new information and we learn new things. Otherwise, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's and it's almost as if we don't realize grace needs to be extended in all areas, especially when it comes to opinions, like you said, that become dogmatic, and people are just want to believe what they currently believe and don't want to change. They're looking for only reasons to stay the same rather than to change. And it's
Change is hard.
yeah, yeah,
Thing.
yeah.
Change requires an input of energy, and
Mm.
people oftentimes want to take the path of least resistance, which is to stay the same.
And that's where things become dangerous. And exactly what you just said, we sit back and look at history. Perhaps we're even looking at current events, but we look at history and we say, like, how could this have happened? How could people just have allowed this to happen?
Mm,
And a lot of it is because people will just go with the flow. Nobody necessarily wants to be the one to ruffle the feathers. Nobody wants to just be the one that's, going to ask a simple question. Like, we're not even asking people to be revolutionaries. It's just, we just want it to be okay to simply ask questions to gain more of an understanding and for everybody's perspective to be included. And, that's if somebody judged me on how I thought passionately, what I believe, what I thought I knew at the time 5 years ago,
mm,
I'm a totally different person.
absolutely.
I'm a totally, and it's in areas that you don't necessarily expect people to be able to change in as much, but religion and spirituality, politics, all these different things, just based on observing when I get new information, I'm going to give you a new answer.
Mm,
Now, that may be the same answer in some cases, but in other cases, it may be a different answer. But either way, I'm looking for new information so that way I can make a better decision moving forward. And it seems like we can't do that right now.
I love. Listen, you're speaking poetry right now. What you're saying right now, brother, is poetry. It has the ring of truth to it. I have a lot to say about that. Oh man, this is a good topic.
Nah, let it rip. Let it rip.
Yeah, let's go, man. Because I feel like, how do I say this? I'm thinking about human relationships and what types of human relationships, what types of characteristics and qualities are necessary to bring about this kind of authentic dialogue, right? And what comes to my mind right now as you and I talk about this is, it seems to me like in the Western world, particularly in the United States, there's a culture and an emphasis on debate. So we're going to debate a topic, right? You and I have a certain view or perspective, climate change, COVID-19, whatever it is, right? We're going to debate. Now, let's look at that for a second. Let's look at that. There's the academic term debate, where people join debate teams in colleges and universities and that sort of thing. But in day-to-day American dialogue, debate is two sides coming together, both presenting their case. There's a winner and there's a loser. And when you're engaged in a mode of debate, I think it's fair to say that what you're essentially trying to do is prove the other case wrong and prove your own case correct. I think this is largely what a lot of people in society are doing. They're engaged in modes of debate. And I'm not sure a debate is a constructive way to have a human dialogue and to learn, to advance learning, and to bring about growth and change. I don't think that happens through debate, actually. And so for me, I mean, think about it. There's a lot of other things that dovetail into this, right? A lot of the time when people get defensive, what's happening on a psychological level and even on a spiritual level, people will over-identify with their ideas and beliefs. So if I have a certain belief, let's say about climate change or about any other topic, right? That belief or idea, I incorporate it into my identity, into who I am. And then when someone else disagrees with that idea, with that particular set of ideas or beliefs, I take it as an attack. Because now it's not questioning the idea, it's questioning who I am. It's questioning my very identity, and that is unacceptable. And so you have conflict. It creates disunity, contention between people. And there's no dialogue. There's no constructive dialogue. Both sides get locked. So for people, members of the Bahá'í Faith, there's a really powerful concept of consultation. And in consultation, what you're supposed to do is be detached from your own ideas and beliefs. So that my idea or belief is not, first of all, who I am or my identity. It's an idea or belief, and I'm detached from it. And I'm going to put it out there on the table. I'm going to let go of my ego, and I'm going to listen and try to engage in a real conversation with somebody else. And the object of the consultation is to find truth. It's not about being right or wrong. It's not a debate. It's not a conflict where I'm trying to prove you wrong and you're trying to prove me wrong. It's like you and I together are truth seekers. We're two brothers, and we're talking together to try to find some higher truth together. That's the kind of dialogue or discussion like the one we're having right now that advances knowledge and truth and learning, not debate. This is just my own opinion. I'm not saying that this is factually true. This is just my perspective,
I agree with your perspective.
We're debating too much and at each other's throats rather than learning how to consult together in a detached manner where we don't get overly fixated on our beliefs and ideas. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Our mutual friend, Pete, he sent me a video maybe a week ago, and it changed my life. And this video was an interview. I forget the exact platform, but it was with Deepak Chopra.
Okay.
And I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. And he was saying that I don't debate anymore. He said, why would I debate? Honestly, every time there's a debate, and I would get hyped up because he was saying that he likes that competitive aspect. He likes saying that I won this debate, but he realized at the end that they are even more separate than they initially were when they started.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's
It,
exactly right.
mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. Rather than
Mm-hmm.
creating unity and bringing people together so that they can have these dialogues and see each other in a more unified way, it separates people, pulls them apart, and creates conflict. Of course. I mean, have you ever seen a debate where somebody was not upset or there was not this sense of tension?
Yeah.
It's always there in a debate.
Mm-hmm.
The
It's
winner-
always going to be there, and I think it's almost as if it's like from high school to rap music to everything. When you think about what sells, people going, people being combative to animal fighting, whatever it is, you know what I mean? It just sells. Movies, you got to have a villain and you got to have a hero. Like that's
Yeah,
people have to
exactly.
be pitted against each other.
There's a
But
David and a Goliath, right?
it is, and we don't realize how if even from a selfish perspective, I've
Mhm.
learned that I want to be able to change. I've seen the benefits in me changing my perspective and when I'm open enough to say like, yo, this is my opinion. I'm a very direct person and I'm a very passionate person. And when I speak on something, it's usually, if I'm passionate about it, it is the case that I've done certain research. However, I am always open to the possibility and the likelihood in some cases that I may be wrong.
Right.
And from a selfish standpoint, if I'm wrong, and you and I are having a conversation, and I came into it with one thing, and I realized like, oh shoot, I was wrong about that. Now I see it more clearer.
Mhm.
I gain more from you. I
Mhm.
gain more than you. You know what I'm saying? Like from a selfish standpoint, like please, somebody tell me this is how I feel, and don't confuse my passion with not being open enough to be wrong. And I realized that even with my, as I had to grow, you got to ease up on some of the passion. You got to be able to conduct these conversations in ways to where people feel comfortable having them with you. And that's the start to where when there's not that animosity in the beginning, we got a chance.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's beautifully put, man, And you use that word passion. I feel like sometimes our passions can also be misunderstood or misinterpreted.
Mm-hmm.
They can be very passionate and they can come
Mm-hmm.
off aggressive.
Yeah.
They can you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Especially it's a sensitive society right now. But
Mm,
it's like, do I just keep saying like, forget y'all, society sensitive, or if I'm standing up here and using my time, effort, and energy, do I really want to bring about change? So if I really want to bring about change, then I need to figure out a way to communicate to where I'm trying to convince you of something. So I can't communicate in the style that's best for me. Selfishly, if I'm trying to convince you of something, then it would be in my best interest to communicate in a style that makes you comfortable enough to where you don't feel like you have to just fight back all the time.
right,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right, right. And the science on that is even clear. When people are in a defensive mode emotionally, cognitively like that, the way you're describing, their capacity to take in new information and learn effectively drops to zero.
Mm.
When we get emotional, when we get angry, when we get anxious, when we get jacked up, the prefrontal cortex is hijacked. The prefrontal cortex is a part of the brain that's responsible for higher level thinking, executive control, and executive functioning, for learning new things, right? That part of the brain gets hijacked, and the part of the brain that's emotional, called the amygdala, is activated. We're in the emotional part of our brain because we're upset or jacked up about something. So we can't really listen to other people and take in their perspective. So you got two people just talking over each other. And
And
if you
it's a
watch,
block.
yeah, of course, there's a block. And people will just talk over each other. Their capacity to actually hear each other out and listen and take in that other perspective is diminished. It's not there.
Communication. It's one of the most important things. I learn more and more. I'm reminded every day in my relationship how important communication is, and that's relationships across the board, I should say.
Mm.
But it's something that we're not. taught the most important things as when I sit back and I'm thinking like, okay, what would help me in certain areas?
Mm.
How to resolve conflict, how to have conversations, express your point without overwhelming and bashing somebody else. We don't learn any of this stuff. So it's kind of like if that's not just your natural disposition, it can be tricky. Like you said earlier, it's hard to change. It's hard to change. We weren't taught a lot of these things. And I
Mhm.
wish we would get back to more of the debate club. Like I think about great debaters. What it allows us to do, it allows us to understand the point in a debate. It allows us to maybe, even if it is going to be, a little bit, back and forth, at least you're coming with some sort of substance, with it. But it still needs to be coupled with what we've been talking about all along, where people just maybe let down their ego, understand that, none of us know, the all truth, none of us have that. So the only way we can get closer to that is to hear other people's perspectives.
And come at it with the intention that you described earlier. You
Mm,
know, if your intention is to somehow benefit the world, create something positive out there that's bigger than yourself, to advance knowledge, truth, understanding, right? That's a very pure intention. That's a very noble intention. If my intention is just to prove you wrong or to advance my views over you, well, if that's actually my intention, guess what? It's going to play itself out in the way that we communicate. Okay. You're going to notice that I'm clearly trying to push something into you and pound something into you that I believe to be true. And then you're going to get defensive. Of course you are.
mhm,
Right.
yeah.
That's not a mode that's constructive in my view. Again, it's not. We have to also understand that as human beings, believe it or not, we do not have the capacity to change other people.
Mm,
Human beings have the capacity to change themselves. We can provide a perspective or information or truth or knowledge, but it's up to the person what they do with that. So we have to
100%.
recognize that we don't have the ability to change other people. So we shouldn't really be trying to do that directly. That should not be the goal, in my view. It's more like, okay, let's talk together and learn from each other. Here, I'm putting this out on the table. You're putting this out on the table. And how can we learn from each other? Because I can't control what you do with what I put out there. That's up to you. That's up to you. I'm not, you know what I'm saying?
100%.
We don't
And
have that
yeah.
power to change each other directly. We can influence each other, but not directly change each other.
Mhm. And it does seem like we've been, I don't know, it seems like we've just been hardened, and all of these situations happen, no matter what comes up. It just seems like, oh, that's just another thing that divides us more. And
Mm,
whatever is in the middle, of us being divided, it seems like that's becoming harder and harder. And that wall is becoming thicker and thicker to the
mm,
point where we're just, you can get in some conversations where it's like, yo, I can't even believe we're like, that's what politicians are debating, like that type, like that's really where we are. And I don't know if they're a reflection of us, we're a reflection of them, but it just seems like the overall culture, the temperature, especially in America, that's really what I can speak on. But I'm sure everybody has their own issues. But we on a large scale need to figure out how we can move forward, and understand that we are not all, um, you know, as the people that benefit the most from us hating each other, it's not us. So we don't benefit from that. There are maybe people that do, but that's not us.
mhm, mhm.
Mhm. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Mhm. So it's funny. I had a couple questions. Go. No, please, please.
I would even argue that politicians and the powers that would be at the top that are pulling the strings in various ways, I would even argue that they don't even benefit.
Mm,
Let me say why, okay? And you may disagree with this, and that's perfectly fine, of course. I'm thinking in one sense they do benefit. They may benefit politically, they may benefit from making money by manipulating the masses of people, divide and conquer strategies. If you divide and conquer the people, then they're always divided and you can do whatever you want. You can get away with stuff more easily. But on a higher level, I think in a spiritual sense, the people that do that are going to pay the price themselves too, because they're creating disorder in a society. They're creating chaos and problems in the same society in which they live.
You're right. You're right.
A higher level, those people, you think they're benefiting on one level, but they're not separate from the world they're creating. They're creating a world that's full of chaos, and they're in that world.
You're right.
That's kind of like the politician who passes laws to do something, I don't know what, and then the same destructive society that this politician has contributed to results in the death or killing of their own child or something like that.
You're
Their
right.
kids and their family are not separate from the social ills. They're going to be affected by it too, one way or another. They can't escape that. There's no escape. Whether you're a politician or not, you live in this world.
You could try to put a bubble around you as much as you can, but at the end of the day, you still have to live here. And even to the spiritual point that you brought up, and that's exactly, think about even how I was thinking. The benefit I was just talking about from a monetary standpoint, power standpoint, but that's not the ultimate benefit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the ultimate benefit is what you mentioned on a spiritual level. Whenever that judgment comes, or just from a pure, even if there is no whatever you believe, the energy, you putting out negative energy, that's gonna come show up at your doorstep sooner or
Exactly.
later. And if it's
Exactly.
not your doorstep, it may be your kid's doorstep, it may be
Right.
your grandkid's doorstep. So at some point, somebody's gonna have to answer to it.
Exactly. Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
That's the point, man. So you will always, when you do an injustice to another person or to society, or you create damage or something negative, you will always suffer the spiritual consequences of that in one way or another.
Mm.
You will, whether you realize it or not.
I agree 100%, and I appreciate you reminding me of that, because in my head, we think about different ways to influence people. And I always say, like, unless you can make something cool, people aren't going to buy into it. And from your perspective, instead of me and us or whoever, you know, focusing on the negatives, now you just gave me a way that maybe we can convince them. And I guess that's one of the positive, or one of the best things when it comes to religion and spirituality, is it's a certain level of accountability that otherwise is not there. So if
Mm,
we're reminding those people, like, hey, you're going to have to answer for this one day. You may think life is great for you. You're making money, you're powerful, all these different things. But, it's going to be a certain point where all that evil that you do, you're going to have to answer for it. And just like anything else, you're going to be held accountable,
mm-hmm.
whether it's nature, whether it's law, whatever it is, whether it's spiritual, across the board. So maybe that's a nice way to convince them. I don't know if it'll be strong enough, but at least it'll help convince some people.
Well, two things here. Like one of them is, yes, I do think we have to try to influence people in the positive direction according to the best of our abilities. I sincerely believe the vast majority of people, when they share their views or beliefs or opinions, they're not trying to hurt anybody. They're just sharing what they believe in their heart to be true and right. Okay? Unless you're a psychopath or something like that. You're trying to intentionally manipulate somebody to get some. There are people like that, okay? But psychopaths make up 1% of the population,
Mhm,
less than 1% of the population. So that's not common. Most people are genuinely trying to do what they think is best.
mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
I
Um,
agree with that.
you
I
know,
agree.
most people really are, I think. Not everybody, but
Mhm.
most people I think are. Um, I lost my train of thought
Is it
there.
victims of circumstance, as far as and I don't even like saying victim, but when you allow your circumstance to determine how you're going to think and your perspective on everything, then you do become a victim to it, because you're not able to step outside of it and grow in different areas. So
Mhm.
at least that's what as you were talking, that's what I was thinking of. But I definitely agree.
Oh, so here's what I was gonna say. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
because I got like 3 or 4 different
No,
thoughts.
yeah. No, trust me, it's happening here.
You got me going, man. We're talking about so many interesting topics here. Um, we can try to convince people in positions of prominence, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
right? People that are in a position of power or prominence. It could be politicians, it could be wealthy individuals, corporations, scientists who control the flow of knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
because the people who are holding the knowledge are the scientists, largely, right? They're the ones doing the research and telling everybody what's true, right?
Right.
And so, on one level, we can try to influence these people. Okay, that's one approach. I think on another approach, on another level, is not to necessarily try to change what you think needs to change, but to create something new, to put your energy into creating something new and different rather than trying to convince these people here, hey, what you're doing is not right. Instead, let's model it. Let's create a new model, something different for society, a different way of living, a different way of being. And when people are given a different choice, a different way to do things, they might be positively influenced by that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? I don't know
It,
if that's
it makes total sense. I guess you did check out the interview with Deepak Chopra, because that's exactly what he said. And as my other scholarly friend has said, be the change. You want
yes.
to see the change? Just you can spend all your effort and energy trying to convince somebody, or you can just be the change, and they'll
Correct.
see the benefits that come along with it, and maybe that will convince them, or it won't, but at least it'll convince others.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
so we have to be careful, I think. It can become a little bit of a trap, because at some point you realize you're spending so much mental, emotional, spiritual energy always trying to convince people to be doing something else, or that what they're doing is wrong. And it might be wrong, but you're spending your time and energy trying to convince these people rather than modeling it yourself and building a new way to do it. Because I truly believe that when something benefits society and it's positive, it's just, it's true, it's right, the truth always is going to come out. People will eventually recognize it and embrace it, always.
I
But
agree.
if people have no alternative, for instance, if they look at the political system, which is corrupt, incredibly corrupt, and broken, and no longer serves the needs of humanity, and they think that this is the only way to create societal change is by participating in this broken political system, well, what are they going to do?
Mm-hmm.
What are they going to do? They're trying to play by the rules of a system that is completely defunct,
What do
right?
you think the whole thing needs to be? What would you recommend on that?
And
Because I agree with you. I agree with you, and I've thought so many different things as far as trying this, trying that. I am happy that RFK Jr. is running as an independent, because I do think that that's one of the biggest problems when you only have two parties. One side gets extreme, the other side's going to get extreme. Then they get more extreme. Then they get more extreme. Meanwhile, the overwhelming, silent, maybe majority are in the middle, just kind of sitting here like, what's going on?
I don't here's something radical.
Mm-hmm.
Ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be something radical. I think we should do away with political parties altogether.
100%.
I don't see why we even need. Why don't you just vote for the person who has the best qualities? Okay, the most sincere intention, the most capacity to transform society and to serve the people. What does it matter what camp they belong to?
You're right.
These are just traps that create division and disunity.
You're
Like you
right.
said, tribalism.
Mm-hmm.
Why do
That's
we
exactly
even
what it
need
is.
political parties? And if you go back to the early history of the country, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not an expert on this, I don't think there was such thing as political parties. At some point, they created these two systems, but they didn't always exist even.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a buddy of mine. He's a chiropractor down in Florida. Shout out to Jeffrey Solomon, mobile Chiro. But I was talking to him. He ran for office and he almost won. I forget exactly the position he was running for, but the reason why he thinks he lost is because he was trying to get rid of, what's it called when even right now where there's you have to represent one of the parties to run. I forget what it is, or only people who are a part of the Republican Party, or only people that are part of the Democratic Party can vote for who's going to be the one that represents everyone, rather
Okay.
than it just being open. I forget exactly what the concept is, but it's to your point. Yours is even taking it a step further, which is why do you need a party? Why
Yeah.
do you need a party? Just run.
Mm-hmm.
Just run. And it's a system. It's the only system maybe of checks and balances that can work within this system. Get rid of the parties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Now, here's an interesting problem, though.
Mm-hmm.
See, I'm gonna challenge my own beliefs here, my own thoughts. Okay. So I think this whole business of political parties is very, very divisive, and it's part of what's destroying, creating all these social problems in our society right now, right? Where you have one side that's Democratic, one side that identifies as Republican. They have certain beliefs and values, and they're at each other's throats. They
Mm-hmm.
literally think one side thinks the other side is trying to destroy the country, literally they're Satan, they're the devil, and the other side thinks the same thing about the other ones. Okay.
It is.
I mean,
It's
it's
gang.
a recipe for disaster. Of course it is.
It's literally gang wars. Like, we
Yes,
criticize
Bloods and Crips.
Bloods and Crips, right? We criticize them. We just can't understand how they can just be killing each other and, fighting over blocks they don't own, whatever neighborhoods they don't own. And then you have politicians, and you look at it, and it's the same thing. Now, you could understand where in a certain neighborhood how things can grow out of that, but we would expect our politicians to be held to a higher standard, to where we're not allowing it, and they're not even wanting to participate in something like that.
Mhm.
It's crazy. It's
So
crazy where we've gotten.
here's the thing, right? Okay, let's say there were no political parties. Let's do a thought experiment,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's no Democratic Party, no Republican Party, no whatever other parties exist. There's other ones too, right? Some of the lesser known, smaller parties, right?
Mm-hmm.
Green Party or whatever, Tea Party. Let's say none of these exist, right? Now a presidential election comes. There's something, I believe, on the order of 320 or 330 million people living in the United States. So the population of the US is somewhere between, I believe, 320 and 330 right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Million. Who do you vote for? How do you even know who to vote for? Think deeply
Yeah.
about that for a second, because there's over 300 million people in the country. How in the world are you going to get enough votes around one person when we don't know each other?
Mm-hmm.
You might know a few people in your network or in your community, but if only you know them and a few other people in your local community know them, they might get a few hundred votes, a few thousand votes. That's not going to be enough to make somebody president of the whole country.
Right.
How do you solve that problem? Think about it. It's very deep.
I think it goes back to what I've now been adopting and moving towards, my philosophy on life: balance. And I
Mhm.
think the balance would be, because you mentioned earlier, as far as there being no political parties early on, and it probably started off like that, and then they started asking those very same questions that you just asked. Well, how can I convince this person? And then they had to team up with different people. Well, why don't what if we team up? You're in Alabama, I'm in Jersey. Maybe we can team up. We can work, or you're in another county. Maybe we can team up. And that's probably where a lot of these political ties parties started. So maybe the balance would be, we understand where we are, but creating some regulations around certain things, or I really don't know, but
How
maybe some parties, but you know what I mean? Maybe making things open as far as anybody can vote for this particular. I really, that's a good,
Think about it, man.
yeah, yeah,
How how the hell would we get the whole
yeah.
country to vote one person into the presidency when if
Mhm.
there's no political party? So what I'm doing right now is challenging my own perspective.
Right.
I'm working it out through with you, right?
Mhm.
I genuinely believe we have to do away with political parties, 100%. Okay,
Mhm.
but I can understand when you think about it, David, and my perspective. People are not really consciously, freely voting for the person they want to vote for. You're voting for who's presented to you.
Mhm.
It's already pre-filtered. They decide who's going to be the Democratic runner-up, who's going to be the Republican, and you vote for one of the people that's put in front of your face.
Mhm.
It's not like you're actually voting for who you want to vote for. You're voting for who's presented to you.
Right. Right.
Okay. That's no secret. I think we all know that. But this business of a Democratic and a Republican Party allows for some sort of a filtration process so that a very small group of people can be presented to the whole country as candidates.
Right.
And so now you've got somebody to vote for, and the whole country has somebody to vote for. But if you didn't have those political parties, what would we do?
I
To
know a
me,
lot. Yeah.
I don't know the answer to this
Mhm.
question at all. I'm not saying I do. I do not at all. But what it does imply to me is I suspect that society is going to radically change and evolve spiritually, intellectually, and in every other way. Part of, I think, the answer to this, at least, is community.
Mm.
And that might sound counterintuitive or strange thing to say. Like, what is community? Why am I bringing that in here? But I think we have to build unified communities from the bottom up, where people are engaged in the process of serving their communities, and they start to learn more about each other. They start to connect more. You start to build more unity. I think that has something to do with this process. I'm not sure.
I agree. And I'll tell you why I agree. I've gone back and forth with my thoughts on America.
Mhm.
Um, some people do not feel like when this group is super prideful of America compared to this group that has no pride in America because for whatever reason, legit reasons maybe on both sides.
Mhm.
When there's that lack of pride, which should start in the community.
Mhm.
When there's that lack of pride, people, for one, I be honest with you, you take for granted where you are and how we're living here. We definitely take it for granted. Um,
Absolutely.
and it factors into so many other areas of our lives that hold us back. And I'm losing a little bit of my train of thought and where I was going, but I wanted to address the point that you just made. But it'll come back to me. It'll come back to me. It'll come back to me.
Were you talking about I think you were talking about people. What I heard from that was
Mhm.
you were discussing like people that have a lot of pride and people that have none whatsoever.
Yeah,
You were
I got
looking at those two
yeah.
sides, I think.
It came back, and I was reminded by something that Vivek Ramaswamy brought up.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that he was creating, he said, there should be certain requirements in order to vote. And one of those requirements was serving time in the military or doing something, serving your country. And I think that that takes away a lot of pride. When I hear about other people and other countries and cultures to
Mhm.
where that's more of a qualification, a rites of passage, we
Mhm.
don't have those rites of passage. And I think that's what allows us to take for granted, where we're living. And that's not necessarily just on us, but if there's no pride in us, in the sense of community, then to me, there's not going to be that common sense or group approach to say, hey, this decision I'm making is not just what's in my best interest, but it's
Right.
like what's best for the community. And even if you're looking at, what's best for you, at least there's a certain sense of let me try to understand that other perspective
Mm.
because I have a community approach. I actually care what happens to my neighbor. Why? Because I like my neighbor. I have a relationship with my neighbor. And the more they keep us divided and almost, it's almost like COVID. Everybody's in the house, everybody's separated. It's easy to spark up something during those times rather than, listen, that's my neighbor. I know that person. I don't care what was said about them. I at least, I can talk to them. I can vouch for them. There's just a different approach to it, I would say.
Yeah. So let me share something with you, okay? If it's okay. In the Baha'i faith, we have elections.
Mm,
There's no clergy in the Baha'i faith.
right.
The prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, as you know, his name was Baha'u'llah. And he taught that humanity has reached a stage of maturity, has reached a stage of spiritual maturity. And we no longer need preachers and pastors and religious clergy to teach us what the spiritual truth is. Every man has the capacity to educate himself and go and learn. It's not 1,000 years ago where most people could not read or write.
Mm.
We all have the duty to educate ourselves and to seek truth and to learn. And everybody has the capacity to do that. It's not like some people can do it and some people can't. We're all human. Everybody can do it. And so Baha'u'llah taught that, we don't need clergy anymore. It's abolished in the Baha'i faith. But what that means, think about it. Because there's no clergy in the Baha'i faith, who administers to the needs of the Baha'i community? We don't have professional clergy. We're all equal. We don't have that. So there's Baha'i elections. There's a Baha'i administrative order to run things, to run certain things in the Baha'i faith. It's not clergy, but there's an administrative order and there's an election process. And there was a book recently written called High Conflict. Okay, I have it right here. It's a phenomenal book. It's by a New York Times best-selling author, and she's analyzing what causes high levels of disunity and conflict in this country and how to go about solving those problems. One thing she did was she went to the Baha'i House of Worship in Chicago, Illinois, and in 1 or 2 chapters, she studies the Baha'i election process, which is one I want to share a little bit about.
Mm-hmm.
So in our election process, there's no mudslinging. There's no campaigning. Okay. You're not allowed to even talk about who you're going to vote for. It's kept confidential. And Baha'is gather, they come together in a spirit of prayer, in a spirit of detachment. And you reflect on who has the spiritual qualities and capacities to best serve in a particular role. And every individual votes for this person. We're not allowed to go, advertise or campaign or anything like that. And it's basically a secret vote so that we don't influence each other or bias each other. But what's profound about the process to me, and this is maybe my own bias as a Baha'i, but Baha'is are engaged in the process of community building. And Baha'is and their friends all over the country are trying to help build spiritually healthy communities and bring people together. And so when you serve with other people in that capacity, there's a lot of people my wife and I serve with. We're doing all sorts of different things. You actually learn what their spiritual and intellectual qualities are, their capacities are. So you're not willy-nilly just voting for somebody you think is cool. It's not a popularity vote.
Mm.
You've served alongside somebody in the community. And so your ability to think about who would serve that community is heightened.
Mm.
It's based on reality because you've served with these people. And so that voting process is very, very profound
Right.
to me
Yeah.
as a Baha'i. We just had our elections not too long ago for what's called National Convention. So Baha'is will vote for delegates, and then those delegates will go and they will vote for what's called the National Spiritual Assembly, the NSA, of the Baha'is of the United States. And you vote for the delegate based on their spiritual qualities and capacities.
I like that. And it seems as if, and something that I've always been impressed with the Baha'i faith is that the concept of independent investigation, where you get to a certain age and it's on you to independently investigate the Baha'i faith, other faiths, whatever, what it is that you're investigating. And to me, that going along with what you just described is putting more and more responsibility on people. So therefore they take pride in being accountable of it.
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right, man.
Mm-hmm.
The Baha'i writings teach that we should know through our own knowledge and not through the knowledge of our neighbor.
Mm.
Think about how that empowers people. It engages people in this process of investigation as a lifelong learner, not somebody who's a passive recipient. Your job is not to sit there and be fed knowledge by somebody else. Your job is to actively go out there and learn and acquire it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like humanity has been empowered as a result of this.
I agree.
It requires an active role for every human being in society,
Mm-hmm.
not a passive one.
Mm-hmm. It's almost, you hear these stories of people, they're in these groups and there's one person where it's like they're going on a long trail or traveling, some type of challenge or something. And the person in the front, they're pounding away, they're in better shape than the person in the back, and you get to a point where the person in the back is ready to give up. And what they did was, in this story, where they give them more responsibility. They say,
Uh-huh.
all right, you're up. It's time for you to lead. And immediately they're juiced. It's like they got their battery charged to the point where, because now with added responsibility, it's not just about them. And that's the sense of community that you're talking about, because now it's like, oh, now I have to lead everybody. Okay, well, before I was just thinking about different reasons why I can quit, and I can be okay with that. But now that you're actually putting me I'm now responsible for the group. I'm now going to assume a higher level of accountability and buy into it.
Do you think that there's something there when people are given that responsibility? There's something within human beings that allows them to arise to the occasion.
Mhm. I think there's different things in life that prove to me that there's God.
Mhm.
And when you think of something like that, those spiritual connections, because just think about something like that, where how did I have no energy when I was just looking for me? But,
Ah,
but
wow,
now my
wow,
energy improved. I fed off of everybody's energy.
wow.
Like, that proves to me, like, there's certain things that just prove, when we have certain instances that demonstrate how we are connected on a spiritual level, that's the only thing that can be, that has to be the spiritual connection.
And you know what's profound here too is, um, I think about it this way: it's learning to see the unity, the oneness of humanity,
Mm-hmm.
seeing us all as one, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Unity and diversity. We have differences, obviously, but we also have a profound interconnection, a
Mm-hmm.
profound unity.
Yeah.
We're one human race, regardless of religion, class, race, whatever we are. We're all one creation.
Yeah.
And if you think about, let's say, the atomic scale, different levels of existence, right? An individual atom, this is the example I always like to share because I think it's profound. Individual atoms or molecules have very little capacity by themselves. But when they unite and those atoms combine to form a higher structure, new properties, new qualities start to emerge that were not there before.
Mm.
So a simple example would be hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen, the atom oxygen by itself has no special capabilities or properties. Neither does hydrogen. An atom of hydrogen doesn't do anything special
Mm-hmm.
at all, okay? But when you unite them in a chemical bond, in a chemical reaction, hydrogen and oxygen produce liquid water, which sustains all biological life on this planet.
Wow.
In other words, when you unite the parts together, something new is created, new properties emerge that were not present in the individual parts.
Mm.
The
Wow.
hydrogen and oxygen by themselves do nothing. But when you unite them in a bond, you have liquid water, which gives you all biological life.
Mm-hmm.
So, my belief is, if that's true on an atomic scale, which it is, on a molecular scale, how about for human beings?
Mm.
What untapped potentials are possible when human beings unite together with love? I truly believe is limitless. What society can achieve together is there's no limit to it.
Mm-hmm.
But there has to be unity for that to happen.
Yeah.
If we're all individual and living separately, it ain't going to happen.
Mm-mm.
There has to be a way to unite everybody together, and something incredible will result from that. And if it's okay, David, I want to share.
No, please, please, please.
This is a short passage about investigation of truth.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorites. It's from the Bahá'í writings. It says, God has given man the eye of investigation by which he may see and recognize truth. Man is not intended to see through the eyes of another, hear through another's ears, nor comprehend with another's brain. Each human creature has individual endowment, power, and responsibility in the creative plan of God. Therefore, depend upon your own reason and judgment and adhere to the outcome of your investigation.
Mm. that if I may respond, um, and tell me if this is off base as far as what I'm receiving from that. It kind of reminded me of a point that you brought up earlier, regarding the independent investigation. When we independently investigate things, there's a certain substance and connection to it that we otherwise would not have. A
Mm,
lot of the things that we're connected to right now, I just, use my example, me as an example. Uh, my parents adopted their religion from just because their parents,
mhm,
and their parents got it
mhm.
from their parents, and their parents got it from their parents, and
Right,
at a certain point, they probably somebody got it from somebody that was trying to control them in
right.
in one way or another.
Mhm,
And when you do not force people to be responsible for their own independent investigation,
mhm.
then people will just continuously go on. And it goes back to what you said earlier as far as the comfort. Now you're just another sheep, just continuing to, well, this is how they did it, so this is how I do it.
Uh-huh.
And then we end, go ahead, please. Yeah, yeah. No. Go ahead.
That's called
Yeah.
aping the past.
Mhm.
We just repeat
Yeah.
patterns from the past just because our forefathers did them.
Hmm. Yeah.
Correct. I could
There's
not
there's no
possibly.
check. Especially, and we're robbing. This is what has happened to me. When we're younger, I think everybody would acknowledge that we are more sponge like, as we're kids. It's easier for us to, how can I put this? Not only entertain, but take in information, really just take it into a point where we'll just consider it. You know what I mean? As we get older and older, we
Mhm,
become hardened and hardened, and it's harder for us to change. So the few of us that end up getting to their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, at whatever age, and say, you know what? I want to do some independent investigation. I want to
mhm.
do some research on my own. We just robbed ourselves of our developmental years
Right.
of taking in that information, because I don't know with you, when I have a conversation with a kid, that conversation is so much more simplified and it's just
Absolutely.
sensible. Kids are simple. Kids are sensible. Is that right or is that wrong? Like that's just how they look at stuff. Everything is from a young age. And to me, that's so important for us to demand that out of our kids, to expect that, for that to be the standard. No, you investigate on your own. You don't just accept what I did. You have to go through that responsibility, go through that rites of passage on your own. That that's kind of how I see it. And even to your point, where you mentioned, shoot. You take it over. I'm already talking too much. So I'll let you switch it, and then I'll respond to you.
So, this thing you're talking about, something about simplicity and truth.
Mhm.
Einstein said that if you truly understand something, Albert Einstein said this, and I'm paraphrasing, but if you truly understand something, then you should be able to explain it in a very simple manner.
Mm.
And if you can't explain it in a simple way, the way you would talk to a child, you don't really understand it. You're using a lot of words and fluff to fill up the void, meaning you essentially don't understand it.
That's like a sales call. I'm in
Yeah.
sales. So if I get to a point where the better I get at understanding a particular product that I may be selling or trying to convey something, it's simple. We were on a call earlier before this, and I'm talking to my partner, and I'm like, this should be a quick call. The quicker this call, the more it's going to show, the more confident we are in delivering on our end. When we start having to say all this stuff, it's salesy, and that's not us understanding and knowing,
Yes.
you know.
Well, the words that we use are embellishments at some point.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? We're adding in fluff, right? The most profound truths in this life happen to also be the most simple things.
Mhm.
Think about it, right?
Right.
Oneness of humanity, that the ultimate aim of all this existence is love, is unity. That's a very simple thing.
Hmm.
Be more simpler than that,
Right.
right? And yet, for a lot of people, you say something like that, it doesn't sound sexy,
Hmm.
right? So you gotta kind of embellish it and dress it up.
Hmm. And to your point, what's the greatest, even from I got my marketing sales hat on, the greatest slogan, just do it.
Uh huh.
It's simple.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah.
And we underestimate the simplicity so many different ways. And I gotta touch on your Albert Einstein, as far as simplifying stuff, and even going back a little bit, where we learn stuff. The older I get, I understand that the first lesson that they taught me in math, they lied. And it was going back to the sense of community that you described, where if two people get together, it can change, it can move mountains, just two energies coming together. Where you mentioned the elements, what was it? It was oxygen and hydrogen
to form H2O.
To form H2O. 1 + 1. I've been taught my whole life that 1 + 1 = 2. 1 + 1 may equal 2 in some ways, but when it comes to people coming together, it does not. It's compounds.
Absolutely.
And you know what I mean? You can get what one person can do on their own compared to what one person can do on their own. Adding those two together,
it's not adding.
It doesn't even do justice to describe what those two people could do together.
Exactly. 100% agree, bro. 100%. Exactly. The whole is infinitely greater than the sum of the parts. That's exactly right. So magnify that across society, across entire communities, and think about what is possible. Let me say something here real quick. We were talking about individual investigation of truth, then we related that to the simplicity and innocence of children when we talk to children. And actually, this circles back to our earlier conversation, even about political parties, because I'm wondering how somebody can individually investigate truth and engage in a dialogue, a conversation, if they see themselves as belonging to a particular tribe. How that limits your own ability, because if I'm in this tribe, then I have to abide by the thinking and beliefs and mode of this particular tribe. And sometimes my tribe is more important to me than what's true. You see? I have to do what my tribe says. It's not necessarily about truth. It's about tribalism. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And once that decision is made to where we selfishly put us and our people above truth, that's a slippery slope, because once that happens, then it's pretty much throwing our moral compass, throwing integrity, throwing a lot of things out the way. And I told people and I changed my thoughts. I used to think, okay, I got to be tribal. That's the only way we're going to make it, is if we just stick with us, and the problem, as far as with my thought process on that, is I was looking at it based on my skin tone. I was looking at it based on me being an African-American or American, whatever it is, black, whatever you want to call it. I move with a group of people based on their morals, their values, and their principles. And if I prioritize that, then that's always going to align with truth. Because if they have the morals, principles, values that I respect, that I look up to, then when new truth is presented, then they will move accordingly, absorb that new info, and then move accordingly after that, I should say. When people prioritize other things over their morals and values, it throws all of that stuff out the window. And now you're making decisions based on the foundation being bad that are going to compromise everything from that point. So I like I said, that's something that I had to learn. I'm like, I'm not just rooting for somebody. I'm being straight. I'm not just rooting for somebody because they're black. I'm not just rooting for the guy just because that's the guy. I'm not doing that. Shame on me. I don't care what people call me. You know what I mean? I don't care. I move based on morals, values, and principles. Because the moment I don't do that, then I'm no better than the person that I'm trying to tell you that, hey, do it this way rather than that way. So it's tough. It's tough. It's tough. It's tough. Man.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can get overwhelmed with, where you have a good convo, and I'm glad that this convo is a little bit different because we talked about solutions that can be presented. Whether or not, even with your solution as far as no political parties, you don't have to have the entire package together with a bow on it. No, it's for us to have these conversations and to build on them. Now, the next time you and I talk, maybe you know, I may suggest some things. I may suggest some things based on somebody that watched us have a conversation may have suggested. And we're putting all those things into the mix and figuring out what works best without having the pride and ego and tribalism of feeling like I just need to go that way because my people are going that way.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates so much prejudice and bias and injustice and problems in the world when you really think about it. Any conflict or war, really, if you go deep enough, I think it's fair to say it essentially boils down to some form of prejudice. Prejudice is not just black and white. Okay, there's all sorts of different types of prejudices. They're cognitive distortions, fallacies in our thoughts and beliefs.
I agree.
Essentially seeing somebody else as somehow different than you, or seeing yourself as somehow superior to another group of people or human being. It's some form of prejudice that creates conflict or even war. If you look at the Israel-Gaza war right now, what's going on, okay? One side calls the other side terrorists and animals, and the other side says these are Zionist Jews and they're trying to take over the world and this and that, okay? These are prejudices. Plain and simple, they are human prejudices, okay? If both sides saw each other as belonging to the same tribe, which is the human tribe, that's the one tribe on this planet that we all belong to, I truly believe that a lot of these problems would vanish. So there has to be some consciousness of our oneness and conversations around building unity, building authentic dialogue, like you and I talked about, is really the key, because it creates a new way of life for people. So I have a neighbor right here that lives right here, you know, across the street, and she was telling me a story about you know, how her daughter called her racist. Now, this is a white lady that lives across the street from me, right? Her own daughter, who's like in her 20s, called her mom racist because of some, you know, remarks that her mom made. I was in the backyard doing some landscaping, doing some work in my backyard, and she came up to me and she started to talk to me about it. Now, I could have had a defensive reaction, or disengaged. Instead, I sat there. We ended up having like a 1 hour profound conversation. She cried. She cried, and we connected deeply. Profound conversation about race, about religion, spirituality, and we got closer together and built unity. This is with my own neighbor here. I've never talked to her on that level before. You know what I'm saying? We have to find a way to connect with people and build bridges.
Yeah, and if we don't, honestly, and we're not saying everybody. I'm not saying, and I don't think you are. Correct me if I'm wrong. Saying everybody has to. We're one tribe, and everybody has to be the same, the exact same. What it does is it allows everybody to express themselves in however they want to express themselves, because we understand that at the end of the day, we are one. When we look at the most think about the times where we have the most pride. It's unfortunately on the bad end. It's when there's something that happens to maybe like a 9/11, and you looked at how the entire country came together. So different situations. Now that's a negative. Now a positive would be looking at the Olympics. You know, we watch the Olympics and everybody's rooting for, you know, nobody's, oh, I like this basketball team. I like, no, it's, you know, if you're rooting for Team USA, you're rooting for Team USA.
Right.
And I believe that if we don't move towards that, then in a conversation with my neighbor, when I was doing some work around the house, this is when I was growing up, the smartest books, the most intelligent person that I may have known in my life, my neighbor, Philip, he comes over and we start having a conversation about humanity. And we're talking about, I think Barack was president at the time, and we're having different conversations, you know, this, that, how do you feel about, and I asked him, you know, later on in the conversation, I said, well, what's the solution? And he said, perhaps God should just flood the planet again and start over with a new race. Wow. And when he said that to me, I just sat there and I'm like, yo, what? Like, what are you talking about, bro? Like, I'm not ready to die. Like, what you mean? Like, I was literally thinking that. And every day I understand more and more of what
What
he's saying, because if we do not
a reset.
embrace that, then either us with our energy and the universe, it's going to reset. You know, when we sit back and look at all this craziness happening with the weather, with this, if we believe that we're truly spiritual beings connected with the earth, then it's
Mhm,
no wonder why things are all over the place. Look at us as a people. That's
mhm.
the energy that we're putting out. So we'd be fools to not expect that same energy to be returned to us in nature and whatever else way if you believe that we're all connected. So
Absolutely.
it's like we're gonna it's almost like either we're going to address our problem or the universe is going to address us.
Absolutely. You know, I think this process has already been underway.
Yeah.
This is already underway.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
collapse of all these systems around you, okay, whether it's government, whether it's politics, whether it's the family unit, whether it's the institution of marriage, okay, these things are all collapsing very quickly. All the things that were bringing a sense of purpose and meaning and authentic morality, these things are collapsing all around us. Okay. I think this is from my perspective,
Mm-hmm.
humanity undergoes spiritual evolution. Okay, but it doesn't automatically get to a higher place. It's just like exercising or doing something else. In order for the muscles to tear and grow, there is pain.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, when you start lifting those weights and curling, lactic acid builds up in the muscles and they literally tear at some point.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot have growth without pain. Anybody who goes to the gym, any athlete knows that 100% in their heart and soul that without pain, there's no gain. That's where the saying comes from. And I think that that is true on a collective level for all of humanity. All these problems and the pain we're seeing in the world is the sign, actually, that these are the growing pains of a new world order that's emerging.
Mm-hmm.
Like a pregnant belly, and there's all this pain, and something new is about to be born. So, for Baha'is, the analogy is that humanity is going through a transition period. So you have childhood on one end, on the other end, you have adulthood, maturity, and in the middle is adolescence. And adolescence is characterized by what? By turbulence, by identity crisis, by all these kinds of things that you go through as an adolescent. It's a period of turmoil. Your adolescent years are a very chaotic period in your life. And so, developmentally, humanity is going through its adolescence. It's transitioning as it learns basically that it has to embrace these spiritual truths in order to unite as one. And
Wow.
we cannot live this way, plain and simple. And the truth of that is obvious because look around at the world. Look at what's happening.
Everything is chaotic.
They're all collapsing, man. But at the same time, there's new things being created. Profoundly new things, beautiful things, incredibly hopeful things that are happening all over the earth if you know where to look. They are happening.
Wow. That's you mentioned a reset earlier, and that kind of set the tone on exactly how you finished up right now, where it started off there, and if we don't, it's going to be it's kind of, what kind of reset do we want? Do we just want to reset our phone and turn it off and turn it back on, or are we going to need an entirely new phone? And you know what I mean? And that's kind of where we are.
Do away with
Or
phones.
do away with the phones, you know what I'm saying? And the more I look at it, I ask these questions. Like, I'm always, I'm very intrigued by the questions that I have that I just will not be able to find answers to, perhaps.
Like what?
I'll give you one. So I have this theory that everything that we see here with the technology, it's already been here before. Maybe thousands, maybe millions of years, I don't know. But I just looking at where things are, and it's not really a theory that I'm going to stand on. Like I said, I'm passionate. So when I'm not passionate about something, then that means I'm still actively researching it and just looking into it and just being observant.
Okay.
But if we've had different resets, whether it's the story of Noah's Ark, whatever these things are,
Mm-hmm.
I used to look at that movie, The Book of Eli, and how things were. I don't even really know the entire story around it, but I that doesn't seem too far fetched as to, if somebody just starts pressing buttons here and there, this thing could get Book of Eli very quick.
Mhm.
And I wonder if every so often humanity goes through this reset process to where it's like, okay, we build up enough technology to the point where at first we see it as helping us, but then we build it up to the point where it's now can destroy everything.
Right.
And once it destroys everything, then it goes back to what maybe my neighbor suggested, which is, oh, we just start over.
Okay. That is a profoundly beautiful thought. Profound thing you're saying there that is beautiful to me and meaningful and full of truth.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
I happen to believe something very similar, man.
Mm.
Okay. I think that humanity, if you look at history even, goes through there's a cyclical nature to history. Okay, civilizations tend to rise and then they collapse.
Mm.
Like Rome. The classic example everybody likes to talk about is Rome, the greatest civilization, arguably, that this planet has ever seen in terms of culture, technology, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
The civilization rises to such a great height, and then for some reason it collapses. And then another one comes, like the United States.
Mm.
Clearly, we're in a period of collapse. There's no question about that. That to me is very obvious. Okay. But something infinitely greater is going to come too. My point is this: is it a circular pattern? Because if it's a circular pattern, we're locked in a never ending cycle that just repeats itself again and again and again. What's the point of it?
Mm-hmm.
It's just circular logic. Or is it a pattern of circular motion with upward motion, which is symbolized by a spiral? It's like a spiral staircase. There is a part of society where things repeat, but you're operating at a higher and higher level each time. Each reset takes you to a new plateau, a higher place. Because I think society, civilization, spiritually matures more and more with time. With each reset, you're not operating in the same place that you were before. It's
Wow.
not never ending circle. It's a circle that moves upward. This is part of the evolutionary process that God has designed this world to be, I believe. And so humanity now is entering a stage where it has to come to grips with the planetary consciousness of its oneness, that every human being on this planet is essentially one family. What does that mean for how we live? How do we restructure society? How do we organize ourselves? This is a new stage.
Right.
This is clearly a new stage. Humanity has never matured to a place where it could say the whole earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. It was always, first, it started off with nomads, right?
Right.
Clans, small groups of people living and surviving and hunting and gathering. And then it developed into tribes. Then it developed into eventually cities, to nations, to sovereign states and countries, right?
Right.
Now, the next stage of consciousness, clearly, in the global world we're living in, is the recognition that the whole earth is one.
Mm.
That is a new stage of spiritual maturity that is going to be glorious. But before we get there, there's going to be pain involved,
Mm-hmm.
undoubtedly. There's going to be challenges along the way, but we are creating something new too. And I just want to say one thing. I'm talking a lot here.
No, please.
David, I had an experience a few years ago that profoundly moved me to tears. I was traveling alone in Guatemala, Central America, right? I was fascinated with Mayan culture, Mayan civilization, which I still am, right? So this is back in my 20s. And I just had this intuition. I had a feeling my heart was just attracting me to Guatemala for some reason, right? So I get on the plane. I'm like, you're crazy for doing this. I get on the plane. I fly by myself to Guatemala. And I went and lived in some of the local villages with the people there. I'm talking very, very poor people. I stayed in their homes with them. And these people took me in like I was their own family. They embraced me, kissed me, and hugged me, and cooked for me like I was their son. like I was their brother. They've never met me in their lives before, okay? There's a lot of people out there in the world who already understand that we're one family, okay? We have to also recognize this is the United States. It doesn't represent the whole world.
Mm.
And so I had a lot of profound experiences, and I went into the rainforest there, right? I was there for a couple of weeks, and I visited the Mayan ruins. There's a place, it was the capital of the Mayan civilization, David. It's called Tikal,
Mhm.
and it's in Guatemala. It's an entire city, okay, of the ancient Maya world. They have these stone blocks that are several tons, okay, stacked on top of each other in these enormous monuments and structures. And I'm sitting there, I was saying some prayers and I was meditating while I was there and connecting with the local indigenous people. And I was just thinking to myself, my God, how the hell did these people create a city like this in the middle of a rainforest? Even with today's modern technology, we can't, if you took a crane or a construction equipment, you'd have a very tough time moving one of those stones, even, let alone dragging it through a rainforest with
Mhm.
trees and dirt and then stacking them and building a whole city out of it. How the hell did these people do this? Right? My personal conclusion is the same question with ancient Egypt and all these civilizations. Okay. My personal feeling is, after meeting the people and learning about their culture and the Mayan civilization, these people had, it's simple, it's not a complicated answer. These people had such a profound sense of love and unity. This is what we were talking about earlier with, like, the H2O, the water molecule,
Mm.
that these people united together so closely that they were able to accomplish extraordinary tasks that would have been impossible for a divided culture or society to accomplish.
Wow.
The way these people used their consciousness and their energy and their power together as one people allowed them clearly to build these kinds of structures and maybe come up with technologies that we don't even know about. However it happened, it was through the power of unity. There's no doubt about that. If this culture was divided and full of conflict and war, they would never have been able to build something like this. This kind of organization, this kind of order, this kind of beauty arises from unity, from love and people coming together and uniting to build something bigger than themselves. And then I thought to myself, okay, this happened in the Mayan civilization. Look at what they were able to accomplish. What if the whole world, what if all of society was to somehow unify across the planet? What is possible?
Mm.
If they can build something like this thousands of years ago, just by uniting together as one people, what if the whole world unites as one people? What kind of possibility is there? And I got chills. And I'm sitting there in the rainforest thinking about this.
What you're saying reminds me of, that's an amazing story, first and foremost. I need to travel more. And I think those are some of the benefits of traveling. Sometimes when we're here in the United States, like you said, we can very selfishly get consumed or overconsumed with thinking that this is the entire world, and it's
Mhm.
not.
Right.
And from
You
what you
need other
said,
perspectives to
yeah,
recognize you're in a bubble in the US.
yeah,
This
yeah,
country is its own bubble, man.
yeah. And even those areas, some of the things that have stood out to me, because this is where people's the conspiracy stuff comes out, where people think just because they don't want to challenge themselves to think. Um, but a lot of those pyramids,
Mm.
even that some that you may have seen, those pyramid type of structures, those are older. That's the oldest civilization, even compared to Africa. Why
Mm.
are the pyramids over here older than the pyramids over there?
Mm.
But we're told that that's the oldest. So all these things I'm always thinking about. But to your exact point, as far as with the love, when you hear these stories of mothers that are able to lift cars because their kids under them,
Mhm.
we know that we don't tap into whatever percent. Maybe you can help me as far as the percentage of our brains functions that we tap into. It's minimal. It's minimal, and maybe that's what you were observing or feeling or I don't know what the right word is, when people do tap into the love and connect with others, that maybe elevates our capabilities in ways that we can't even fathom because we're not operating on that frequency.
No, we're not operating on that, not even close. The common fallacy with the brain thing, man, we actually do use 100% of our brains, right? This is a common fallacy with that example. We use 100% of our brains, okay? It's just that we don't use all of our brain at the same moment in time. You might be using only this part, and then only this part, then only this part. In other words, it's even on the level of the brain, there's fragmentation. We could somehow use the whole brain at once, unitedly, with all the different parts working together, right? Something remarkable would happen. And the same is true on a collective scale.
Is the solution to that? Because that simplified it. You know why it simplified it? Because if the only thing that would make sense for us to combine all of our brain's functions at once is out of that word that you just described, love. There's no other thing that anybody would be comfortable with, or from a community standpoint. Like, I have this thing where a lot of the things that I do or decisions, when I have a tough decision, I always go back to this. If everybody in the community made this decision, how would it impact the overall community?
Beautiful.
And that allows me to check myself and my ego and my selfishness, and see things from a broader standpoint. It could be something as similar as the other day, we were in the supermarket at Whole Foods, and as much as they cost, they should take care of the carts, whatever. But we're gonna leave the cart, and we're having a conversation, and I was just like, nah, I'm bringing it back. And it was just like, we were joking around saying like, well, if everybody in the store decided to do what we just did, then, you know what I mean? But if everybody brings their cart back, then that's a good thing. So the only thing that we would feel comfortable as human beings committing to 100% of our functions would be love. And I'm not there. I'll be totally honest. I'm not there yet. You know what I mean? But I understand it. I recognize it. And that's been part of the growth that I've attributed to, which is why I said I don't want people to necessarily judge me off of, now I'm accountable. I'll stand on everything, acknowledge, how I thought different things 5-6 years ago. But now I'm just in a different space.
I would just add to that, that every human being can contribute to the betterment of society. It's just that most people are not. In other words, if you have love and unity, and everybody is collectively contributing to building a better community, a better society, you have something vastly different. Okay, if you have 1% of people who are making an effort and trying, and the rest of them are doing something else, you're going to have a different result. People have so much capacity and talent and potential to offer. So if you tap into all of that potential of all these different people, and they're all communicating together with love and unity and contributing, you can build something incredible. You can build something incredible. Part of that means what we talked about earlier, valuing everybody's thoughts and opinions and perspectives, and finding a way to coalesce, combine all of this to create something bigger, something new, something different, So that also means the community has to have a vision, okay? If everybody has a different vision in their mind of what they want to create or what they want to do, you can never create a new structure. So if you and me and 100 people get together, okay, and we want to build a building, let's say, okay, in your mind, your vision is you want to create a Taj Mahal. In my mind, I want to create a skyscraper. And in someone else's mind, they want to create a pyramid. Yeah? We're never going to be able, we all have a different vision. There's no unity of thought. Okay? Everybody has a different vision. We have a different structure in our heads. We're not going to be able to collectively build anything together. There has to be a common vision that people can embrace together somehow for something collectively that will benefit everybody, that they all can work towards. If we all agree that, oh my God, we all have this vision for something and we all see it. Now we can all work together towards this thing.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some unity of vision as well, you know?
Mm-hmm. One of the factors that is so important with community that may be an underrated aspect of it is, all right. So one of the things, to your point, people have convinced themselves that they don't matter.
Yes.
You know, people convince themselves out of their own comfort. Just, oh, I don't even matter. My vote doesn't matter. My this doesn't matter. My people, we convince ourselves that we don't matter. That there's nothing that we as individuals can do to contribute to the larger good.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
the community, this aspect that I'm saying that may be underrated, what a community relies on everybody.
That's right.
We're only as strong as the weakest link. So what community does is it forces you to be responsible for a particular role for everybody.
Right.
So now you're just not an individual thinking that life is just all about you. That forces you to take that responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another maybe unsung aspect of community that solves a lot. It puts responsibility on us. It's not just to take responsibility off us, but it puts responsibility on us as well that we can embrace. But go ahead. Yeah.
I don't have much to add to that. That's profound and beautiful the way you put it, man.
Yeah.
That's honestly a beautiful point you're making. Honestly, that's a very beautiful point you're making. I use the word beauty because there's beauty in truth. Mm-hmm. Beauty is not just aesthetic beauty. Truth and ideas are beautiful. So I want to say something quick about this, though. Mm-hmm. I lost my train of thought. You were talking about responsibility within a community. Mm-hmm. Oh, so what's interesting is that even if you look at nature, okay, if you look at any organism in nature, organisms within nature live in communities. And what's profound is they're not sustainable. They cannot live as individuals. Whether it's ants or bees or zebras, you pick any organism you can think of. Those organisms live together in communities, ecological communities. They cannot survive as individuals. Okay? Wow. It's not sustainable. They will die. They literally cannot survive. Wow. That's true for every organism on this planet, whether it's even a bacteria, man. A bacterial species, microscopic species live in communities, bacterial colonies. They all live in communities, okay? And there's something profound to that if we meditate on that. There's something really profound to that.
It goes back to, it's funny how a lot of this stuff comes to light in these childhood movies. You know, when they talk about the circle of life and Lion King, it's cool. You know, we'll sing the song. It describes so much. You know, when we heard Mufasa describing the Simba, well, we eat the antelope, but the antelope turns into the grass, and then we kind of like make fun of it, where it's like, that was a great way to justify eating the antelope. But in actuality, a lot of this stuff, everything that you're saying, it really is a circle of life. Mm-hmm. It really is. Mm-hmm. Wow. All right. So this isn't, we've been on, I gotta, before we end this and wrap it up, and I give you the last, I want you to, share any thoughts that you may have. And real quick, before you actually do, whenever I bring up the Lion King, I also have to bring up, the concept with Peter Pan. And like, I'm big on making these connections, and the concept with Peter Pan is, and you don't have to share your thoughts now, but maybe think about it, because I want you to commit while we're recording to making this reoccurring at least every month or something where we'll get together. But all right, so then I'm gonna ask you a question or share another philosophy about Peter Pan, and then you can kind of go from there. But Peter Pan, it was all positive thoughts to elevate. For us to fly, for us to soar, you had to think positive thoughts. And if you thought negative thoughts, you would fall. You wouldn't be able to fly. All these different things. Something as simple as that
Mhm.
literally tells us like we are elevated when we are doing positive, when we are thinking positive, when everything that we embrace is positive. And you have to get all of those negative thoughts out of your head in order for you to get off the ground an inch and fly. You know what I mean? So that's kind of, I'm big on drawing these comparisons. Maybe I'm just waiting for
Really good, man. You snap. I love what
man,
I love.
man. I'm getting ready. I want to have some kids soon, so I gotta be able to make sure I'm prepared. Like, well, you know what that movie's really about. Like, I'm gonna be that I'm gonna be that dad. But no, it's I mean this with all sincerity. There's certain people that I have conversations with. Maybe I can count on one hand of that allow me to learn, allow me to share ideas, and it's in a space where the only thing we are looking to do is grow.
Right.
I have those conversations with you. I can't really begin to describe in words how appreciative I am, just to be able to have these conversations, bounce these ideas off. Some of the stuff that I say, I don't like to tell everybody because it's like, yo, they walking away from me like, yo, that dude's crazy, don't they? You know what I mean?
You can't have, unfortunately, you
Yeah.
can't have the combo with
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
It goes back to what we were talking about.
Yeah. So that's why I'm appreciative of this. This is needed. This is needed for me selfishly, but I think these combos are needed overall because we need some more balanced perspective presented to us, because if we don't have it, we are going to get that reset, whether it's a forced reset or whether we decide to do the reset on our own. But the reset's coming, or it's here, whatever, however we want to look at it.
I think it's interesting because a lot of the ideas and concepts, learning is always mutual. When you create the right environment, both souls, both people should be engaged in a process of transforming, of becoming truer versions of themselves, higher versions of themselves, elevate, right? I feel that way with you every single time. We learn so much from each other. And it's interesting how a lot of the things we're talking about, we're trying to embody in this conversation. We talked about this way of not debating. I've never felt like you and I are debating.
No.
Sharing ideas together, and from each other. This is what we're talking about. We're doing it right now in the present, here and now moment. This is a microcosm of what you and I have been talking about, actually.
Wow. Be the change.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you. Y'all heard him commit. We're gonna do it, and it's more so on me, because like I want to be very point out the fact that if it was not for you, we would not be here having this conversation. You know what I mean?
I would say the same to you, brother.
Well, thank you.
If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be having this convo either.
Wow.
And that's the point. It takes both of us.
Yeah. Big bro. I appreciate you. I'm not even gonna make a long exit outro because I'll tell you why. Because I'm looking at it like as soon as we get off, I'm gonna call you and we'll be on the phone for another. No, but we will be here again. And for the audience listening, whoever's listening, especially if you made it to this point of the conversation, I hope you had some takeaways. I hope you approach everything as we're approaching everything, where we just want to learn and we want the world to be in a better place. And it takes everybody. So if you're hearing this, it takes you as well. It takes all of us, maybe letting our ego down, putting the pride to the side, and just having a genuine conversation, where we feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable, to express different things and to receive different things. So that way we can put our community, because we are one community, in a better place. Yeah. So we'll continue the convo. Alex, I will see you soon. And with that, we will wrap it up. But I appreciate you, big bro. I really do.
Much love, man. Thanks for having me on.
Right back at you. Oh, yeah, big fish. We the ones that you want to get